Hi, my name is Mary Pat Varga. Welcome to this on-demand course that we call OnPoint Presentations. Today in our course we're going to look at how to engage, influence, and activate all of our audiences. You know, it's interesting because in today's digital, technology-driven world where we are communicating via emails, texts, WebEx, teleconferences, Snapchats, you name it. What's really becoming the way that we can differentiate ourselves in the digital world is through our face-to-face, eye-to-eye, belly-to-belly, and toe-to-toe communication. As a speech coach, working with everybody from the CEO of a company to frontline professionals for many years, what we've done in this course today is we've gleaned 13 best practices when it comes to being an effective presenter. So that's the scope of the work that we're going to be doing today. And before we get into those different best practices, I'm going to start by sharing with you the path to presentation mastery. As I've worked with people through the years, I've found that you go through 3 different stages. That first stage is self. In other words, when we start making presentations, we're a little nervous, right? And we are worried about how we look, how we sound, if people are going to find what we're doing credible. And it's a very natural but self-centered stage of presenting. That's when we get nervous, and sometimes our message can get derailed because of that. Now, once we get over those nerves and the butterflies that many of us experience, and we get them to fly in formation, we move to the second stage, which is content. And that's where we focus on the information that we're going to be sharing with our audience. We do our homework, our research. We organize our ideas in an effective way, which is fantastic. Then we move to the third stage of mastery, which is a focus on the audience. This is what I call the PhD level of presenting. And it seems so simplistic, yet it really, I can tell when people reach that stage because they've gotten over their personal nerves, they feel comfortable in the skin they're in, they know their content, they're experts in their subject matter, and then it's all about focusing in on the audience and recognizing what they need, what they want, and delivering the message according to that. So just keep that in mind as we go through our course today, that our ultimate goal is to reach the audience and to make sure that everything we're doing is truly in service of the audience. All right, the next thing that I want to talk to you about is, before we get into the best practices, we want to begin with establishing our intent. In the business place, there are 3 different kinds of presentations. We have informational, persuasive, or motivational presentations. So today I want you to be thinking about maybe an upcoming presentation you have, because it would be great for you to work in these tools and techniques into that presentation. So think about an upcoming presentation you have. And think about, is your primary purpose to inform your audience, to persuade your audience, or to actually motivate them? So let's talk about the differences between those 3. When we talk about informational presenting, the role that we take on is that of a reporter. We're really educating our audience. We're giving them the facts, the figures, the statistics, the case studies, the content they need to be well informed. When we're persuading, the role that we take on is that of a change agent. We're actually working to get people to think differently about something, do something differently, buy our products or services, and we're really getting them to move in a different direction. The third type is a motivational presentation. Now, all of us at some time or another have heard a motivational speaker. What are they trying to do? They're trying to rally us, cheerlead us on. And so when I think of a motivational role, it's really that of a mood maker. They're trying to create a mood, a tone, an atmosphere. So what kind of presentation do you have coming up? Is your primary purpose to inform, to persuade, or to motivate? As you're thinking about your primary purpose, I also want you to remember that ideally, a presentation encompasses elements of all three. So even in our brief presentation today, I'm certainly trying to inform you. That's my primary purpose. I'm educating you on 13 presentation skills, best practices. However, I'm also trying to persuade you. I'm trying to get you to integrate some of these presentation tools and techniques into your next presentation. And finally, I'm trying to motivate you, create a tone or an atmosphere in this presentation to get you to feel comfortable about utilizing these ideas. So again, take just a moment now to think about what your primary purpose is for an upcoming presentation. All right, let's now jump right into our 13 best practices. The first one is what I call creating an SOP. How many of you know what an SOP is? It's a military term that means standard operating procedure. And I know all of us experience nerves and get a little bit anxious before we make a presentation. So I think it's really important to establish a ritual, a standard operating procedure that helps us get centered and calm before we present. For me, there are three key elements to that SOP. The first one is to visualize. So think for a moment about visualizing your ideal presentation. One of the things that I like to do is take 60 seconds before I present, and I even close my eyes, and I imagine myself moving into the space where I'm going to be presenting. I see all of the eyes on me, and I'm comfortable with that. And everybody's on the edge of their seat. They can't wait to hear what I have to say. They listen intently to my presentation, and at the end, they give me a standing ovation. So I just take 60 seconds to see that in my mind's eye, and that helps me visualize success rather than thinking about all the things that could go wrong. Sometimes that's what we see rather than seeing a great experience. The second thing I want you to do is to affirm. I want you to come up with some sort of tagline, some sort of motto that you might say to yourself to get you in the right frame of mind before you present. Sometimes we say something negative to ourselves, like, I hope I don't mess this up, right? But what I want you to do instead is say something to yourself that gets you thinking about the presentation in the most positive way. So for instance, I might say to myself, I've done my homework, I know my material, I love my audience, we're going to have a great experience together. So I take that moment to visualize, I say something to myself that puts me in a positive frame of mind. The last thing that I do is breathe, which of course is always a great idea. But I want you to be very thoughtful about your breath. And one of the things that I have learned from friends who are actors or yoga instructors, and everybody in between, is the idea of taking a breath in, exhaling through your mouth. On the exhalation, squeeze or contract your lower diaphragm muscles to force the air out. Now I'm going to encourage you to do this with me a couple of times. Breathe in through the nose, exhale through the mouth, and squeeze. Breathe in through the nose, exhale through the mouth, and squeeze. If you did that, you might feel a little bit of just a moment where your heart that might have been racing slows down a little bit. You might have been breathing rapidly. This should get your breath much more centered. Now, some of my clients like to do 10 cycles of that. Others might do 3 or 4. Whatever the magic formula is, your goal here is to get yourself centered and in the present moment. So again, your SOP, standard operating procedure, your ritual before every presentation, and this takes about a total of 3 minutes. Visualize your success. Say your affirmation that gets you in the right frame of mind, and finally, do a couple of rounds of the breathing exercise before you walk into the room where you need to present. After you've done that, we want to talk about clarity of message and organizing your ideas in a way that's going to serve your audience. I call this defining your purpose and your outcome. This actually begins as you're preparing your presentation, where you jot down the purpose of my presentation is to, you're going to complete that sentence. It's going to begin with either inform, persuade, or motivate, depending on what your primary purpose is, followed by the end of my presentation, my audience will. This is your ultimate outcome. This is really where you want to take people and where you're going to assure them that they'll be by the end of the presentation. So for my presentation today, what I might say is the purpose of my presentation today is to inform my audience of 10 presentation skills best practices, or 13 in our case today. And by the end of the presentation, my audience will commit to what they will start, stop, and continue doing. Now, I use this purpose and outcome statement for 2 different purposes. The first is, as I'm putting together my presentation, I actually, on 2 Post-it notes, on one I write my purpose statement, and on the other I write my outcome statement. What do you think that helps me do as I'm preparing my presentation? It helps me create laser-like focus, and it will prevent me from pulling in ideas and thoughts and slides that really aren't aligned to what my purpose is. The second role that the purpose and outcome statement can have is you can share it with your audience as you start. The purpose of our presentation today is to tell you about the 3 biggest business priorities for the week. By the end of the presentation, you'll know about those priorities and you will determine how to best execute against them. What that does to those audience members who tend to be in a somewhat passive position is it wakes them up, it alerts them to what to pay attention to and what to focus on during the presentation. Have you ever been in a presentation where midway through you look at a partner and say, "Why are we here today? What are we talking about?" And it's usually because they have never outlined the purpose and the outcome in advance. So I want you to take just a moment right now to think about that upcoming presentation that you have and craft 2 sentences, your purpose and your outcome. I'll give you a moment to do that. Our third best practice is know your audience. We talked about the audience as the PhD level of mastery when it comes to presentation skills. And this is where I want to reinforce it. A lot of times we design our presentation on really what's most convenient for us, what we want to talk about, what's most efficient for us, instead of really thinking through in advance, what does my audience care about? What really matters to them? And if you do that, you're going to make sure that you provide answers to questions that people are really interested in and what they care about. How can you do it? Well, there's a variety of different ways. You can interview people who are going to be in your audience in advance and find out what they care about, what matters to them. And as you're listening to them, you can actually integrate and utilize their words, their phrases, so that it seems you actually are able to create rapport and a level of intimacy with your audience. So always determine what matters most to them. You may talk to the person who's coordinating the meeting and saying, well, I'm going to be sharing X, Y, and Z with this audience. Can you tell me or confirm with me that that really is important to the audience, or what else might be important? Always know your audience. That is one of the keys to mastery and success.